both as a facility manager and as an entrepreneur and as someone who runs facilities and manages facilities. We are tackling some topics that are important to you. This week, we're talking about logistics. We're talking about MRO. We're talking about all of those things, kind of how they've changed, and maybe look a little bit to the future and think about how they might change for us going forward as we emerge out of this post-pandemic America. I don't know if we're going to call it post-pandemic or post-apocalyptic. I'm not sure. It probably feels
Post-pandemic is a lot of
apocalyptic to a
P's.
lot of us. But we are joined today with, as always on Wired In, the first step to every project is to talk to someone that knows what they're talking about. And today we are joined again by Brandon Borland from FSG, who works with marketing and communications. And also we're joined by Steve Byrne and Andrew Wimmer. Steve and Andrew work a lot with logistics and work a lot with distribution. And they're here to offer their insight and their expertise into this, especially at this time. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Brent.
Hi. Thank you.
First of all, Andrew and Stephen, give us a little bit of your background and tell us how you got to where you are.
Okay, I'll go first there. So I guess I got into distribution and supply business 38 years ago, so I'm kind of the old dog in this industry. And that was back when Bill said, we're going to start a supply company, and we put 1,000 cases of light bulbs in a warehouse in San Antonio. And that was the beginning. We didn't have any customers, but we had 6 kind of lamps and needed to figure out how to get them to market. So we started knocking doors, and that's essentially this business is all I've done for the last 38 years. Love the industry, love the business, and even love these challenging times that we're in as we try to figure out where it's going to go as we move forward.
Excellent. Andrew?
Yeah, and I started with the company about 6 years ago. I came from a previous organization, a small company called Unilever. I did international account executive for China and Latin America markets. And I really came into FSG because we were looking into international shipments, and we were just FSG was just trying to get a hold of how do we do this thing. And so I really came in on the project side. And, through my starting out, I started transitioning into logistics when I saw the need.
So in this time, maybe right now, everything is so weird right now. What are the biggest changes you've seen really over the last 4 weeks, and how do you see it going in the next few?
You want to take that one?
No, we'll go with your perspective.
I mean, I really don't have a crystal ball. What it's going to look like in the next few weeks, I think it's probably not going to clear up until maybe mid-May. I think right now everybody's just kind of hunkering down. I think, cash is king, so keeping capital is probably the most, it's a high priority, and trying to make smart purchasing decisions, especially smart shipping decisions as we're trying to source, which warehouse we're trying to ship from, and really just trying to meet those customer demands that are still operating. I think, it's just trying to be as efficient as possible, but keeping the wheels going.
Steve?
Yeah, I think, it literally, as I've watched and since this thing evolved, when it first started appearing in the news, we were talking about, well, are we dealing with a 2-week event? Are we dealing with a 4-week event? Or are we dealing with an 8-week event? And your perspective is real different when you're thinking about it from a 2-week event to when the realization hits you that it's a 4-week or longer. And for me, what that crystallized was there's a million opinions floating out there. I mean, we all are probably getting 100 emails a day about how to survive in COVID crisis situation. And this is what Industry X is doing. almost to the point of oversaturation with information. And then there's this kind of perspectives of there's optimists on one side and pessimists on the other. And I think what we've tried to communicate to our folks is the thing that's needed most is just a sense of realism. What's real and what's happening on the ground right now. And that's such a moment by moment thing that you really can't go beyond that. So we've had to stay focused on that. We've been fortunate in that there's been an awful lot of business that has continued, and we're continuing to serve that and take care of it. And then we're also trying to respond to those that have said, hey, wait a minute, we've had to delay this or we've slowed down for that, and just realistically address how are we going to support you when that comes back, and what does coming back look like? There's so much unknown and ambiguity right now that I think that's got everybody a little bit uneasy. And so if you try to do anything other than just get through the moment in front of you, you probably will make yourself crazy.
Brandon, I'm sorry. I should have let you introduce yourself at the beginning. I figured we all knew you, and you're an old company. You're only a guest the first 2 times. After that, you're family.
That's it. No, it's family, man. I'm not worried about, I mean, in my role, so Brandon Borland, work for FSG, and one of my roles is to try to go out and figure out exactly where opportunities might exist. What are some of the challenges that the customers that FSG and businesses like us, what are they facing? And then what are some of the solutions that we can bring along to try and help them address those challenges? And that's really my role. And then just to make sure that the people that know how to create the content and everything get their tools to do it and get out there and help customers. And, the thing that's been on my mind a lot, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation today is, the world in the last few weeks, online buying and the remote connection, right, between a marketplace and an individual has been around for a little while, right? We got Amazon, and we're used to now we got pizza trackers. I can watch the Domino's pizza tracker and stuff like that. We're used to that, remote connection, and the same has been true for business for a while. This idea of remote online buying for your business. Centralizing your inventory, moving that inventory from one place, out to your individual location. It's been around for a little while, but I think that it's really highlighted right now, right? I mean, it's, all of a sudden it's like, I've seen the value in the past. Now I really see the value. And I think that that's one of the things that we've talked with Steve in the past and about this very topic of distribution and centralizing it and how you move product, how you manage a large amount of product for customers that are nationwide or whatever. But I wanted to get that perspective of, what are some of the things that we see changing recently, and that question you just asked. And then again, what does the future look like? What are the lessons we've learned? So I thought that would be a great conversation to have today. And that's why I'm here, is just for that conversation.
Okay. Good deal.
Well, Steve, maybe answer that. How has customers' expectations about distribution changed? And Andy, too. How has their expectations changed, especially in this Amazon world? People probably expect a much higher level of support than they did just maybe even a few years ago, right?
Yeah, Amazon has really done a lot of great things to shape our world. And if you think about it, almost prepare us for a time like this, because you can find anything in the world on Amazon, and then they leave you with the impression that you can get it tomorrow. So if you know what you want and you know when you want it, they'll do a pretty good job of getting it to you. I think one of the things, and that works really well for the consumer, the business to consumer model that's out there. I think in the business to business model, one of the things that happens out there is that the materials needed to maintain and keep businesses operational are a lot more complex than what's going on in sort of the consumer world out there. And that complexity has only increased. Products have gotten better. They mirror the advances in technology, and so they do more things. So the people that handle, procure, distribute, install, and deal with those products have been forced to become more skillful in doing that. And that, I think, is the creates that strong need for the human connection. That's where experience comes into play. That's where the ability to help somebody understand, one, what it is they need, and two, how to get that is kind of paramount. So that part is there. Technologically, we're there. You can get anything you want by clicking a few buttons on the web and trying to find it. But what you need, where the challenge arises is when you're not sure of what you need, you're not sure of what you want. And thank goodness there's still people that fill in that gap there.
Andrew, what have you seen?
Yeah, I approach it a little bit different. I think Amazon's done some great things, but we're not Amazon. I think we have a unique clientele where maybe a technician doesn't want it in 2 days. He's maybe on a job site. He can't accept material that early. He doesn't want to leave it out, pay for storage, whatever it may be. And so really for us, it's been about getting that product at the right time, not just a 2-day flat. It's going to be there, because if it's sitting out on a job site for a week, we can say we get 2-day shipping, but so I think for us, our approach has always been, it's tailored to the customer. Our people respond to people's needs. If you need it a week from now, 2 days from now, we can still accommodate that. And I think that's probably the focus on is it's a unique, tailored approach to that customer focus.
I think that's a really good point. One of the things that I think is really different for business, and it's one of the things that I was kind of curious about today, are like, what are those things that businesses need to be thinking about when they're thinking about, we have all these parts and pieces, or we have all of this that we need to maintain, and we want to look at a centralized a company that can help us centralize that, help us manage that. What are some of the questions they have to ask and think about? I think that's a great question. I actually experienced this personally. I had to order a bunch of lumber for a fence that's being built in my backyard, and I ordered it, and the store did not give me an option for when it was delivered. And I'm like kind of sweating right now, because like there might be a huge pile of lumber in my driveway when I get home, because they haven't communicated with me. And so that's a really good question right there. And when you guys are dealing with customers and you're setting up these programs for product management and distribution of the product to those sites, and in this particular case, lamps and fixtures and that sort of thing, what do you discuss with them? Do they come to the table with an expectation of like, we need to have it within 48 hours every time, or we need to be able to change that up? What does that look like when you're negotiating that up front?
That's probably been a really big change as our entire product mix in the industry has sort of turned over. As everything moved to solid state in the last 5 or 6 years, we had a long history of the products in the industry being fairly commoditized. So there was a lot of it around, and there wasn't as many choices. And so things filled pretty quickly. So there was this expectation of, I can get stuff pretty quick and I don't need to plan as much. If there's been anything that I've sensed in the last couple of years is the need for forecasting and planning and understanding client schedules. And I think that's a place where Andrew really plugs in there in terms of accommodating that. Because a couple of things is their schedules, they're uncertain in the client's mind, and they've got to deal with all the variables that are impacting when they're going to get the funding to build something, when it's going to start, when the contractors can be on site. So that's a huge part of it. And that's on the customer side of it. Then you've got to manage the supply chain back to the manufacturers and let them know, because we are also in a world where manufacturing doesn't want to have anything in their warehouse. They want to build it when they have demand for it. So you have to have strong communication about, here's the demand that's coming, here's the anticipated schedule of when it's going to come. Please get your component supply chain in line so that you have it there and are ready to build when it happens. And I'd say that's been the significant thing that has really changed. And we've worked really hard at that the last few years at trying to, one, involve everybody in the supply chain that's got a voice in that, from the end user that's going to own it, to the contractor that's going to oversee the installation of it, to the manufacturer that's going to build the product. And then we fit right into the middle of all of that. And essentially, I often believe that what the distributor does is fix all of the problems in that supply chain, whether they're communication problems, whether they're things that went wrong, the truck took a wrong turn and went to the wrong address and you got to get it back over to the site. That's our world that we live in on a pretty daily basis. And I can't tell you the number of times in the last year I've called Andrew and said, I really need this there tomorrow on a truck dedicated to get it there. And he's always delivered.
That's an interesting point. You know, I mean, as a consumer, we don't think about that a lot, do we, Andrew? We don't. I mean, the Amazon Prime truck just kind of shows up. I don't know how it gets there, and I think that that's really critical for a business to understand up front, is kind of understand what their partner is, how they're actually going to execute it and build it. How do you present that to a business? How do you explain to them in your initial conversation that, I'm just kind of curious, what do you say to them? Like, I just take care of everything, don't worry about it, or do you like list it out?
Yeah.
What we've learned is the old adage, honesty is the best policy. If something can go wrong, it's probably going to happen, and you're going to have a lot of voices in the mix. And things are going to go wrong on multiple levels. And what really matters is how you deal with it and get through it. And that's what we tell them. And then we share with them, this is what we've learned. We've learned that the desire to have X on a project is a wish, right? That's an ambition. The reality of making X happen has to have all of these other voices in the middle, and they've all got opinions about it, and we have to balance and coordinate that. And the earlier in the process that they can connect us to those voices and that we can get them all talking and collaborating, which it's really a cool thing when that collaboration happens, the more likely they're going to hit their schedule dates, the more likely they're going to have a project that's finished and looks like what they envisioned it looking like when they were first putting it all together. So that's a lot of what we say on the front end is these are the things that where we've experienced challenges in the past. Here's the voices that are going to be, struggling through the process with us. Let's all align and team up and kind of pull in the same direction to make that happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things with customers when you're going through that discovery phase is just asking those questions, having salesful, pre-salesful, ask better questions, what that looks like for them. I think, it's true in sales, but it's true in operations, is setting expectations. And I think setting the expectation, if you could set the expectation towards your benefit, great. But I think at the same time, there's a compromise what the customer wants. At the end of the day, some customers know exactly what they want and they tell you, and we'll meet that. Some customers have no idea. And I think this is where we can cultivate that, that approach where we're partnering with you. We can deliver X, Y, Z, here's the better option. What do you want? And ultimately just trying to cut their costs down on the distribution and logistics side, depending on what their schedule looks like.
Yeah, I think that's a really important, I don't want to get past that too fast. And that is, you guys have changed from, questions about having enough in stock to problem solving a supply chain, because you're kind of in the middle of the supply chain now. And so, your ability to communicate and your ability to solve problems is probably as important or even more important than your ability to have the product in stock. Because before we would just call stores and say, hey, do you have this in stock? Now it's not necessarily whether you have it in stock, because nobody does. It's coming from the manufacturer. And it seems like you've switched over to a lot more solving problems and facilitating problems and kind of dealing with the supply chain from both ends at the same time. So if I'm a facility, I run a group of stores, or I have a franchise with a group of stores, and I really need to deal with this supply chain problem of getting product in time. Maybe I'm building or I'm remodeling a lot of stores. What are the kinds of questions I need to ask to make sure that I'm connecting with someone who understands how to solve those problems, or someone who can make that supply chain work for me for my projects?
Yeah, I think if they have a good handle on what their schedule is for, you know, you use the example of opening new stores or rolling out new stores. If they have a good handle on that, they need to ask about, have these products that I've selected, what's the availability look like on those? What do the lead times look like on those? What are the issues with obtaining those? What are the things that impact them? What transportation is required to get that to site? And I'll give you an example. We were doing a project the last year that had some really long fixtures on it, up to 36 feet. And so they had a lot of 12-foot sections. And the first time a delivery showed up at one site and the guy saw 12-foot sections, all he wanted to do was turn the truck around because he said, I'm not capable of handling that. So little things like that, known on the front end, make for a smoother delivery when you get there to the actual site. So you need to confirm specification with them and make them aware of kind of the strengths and weaknesses of what they're desiring in that specification. And then the other one that they'll ask, and they've asked intensely in the last 4 to 5 weeks, is, okay, what are the alternates if plan A goes astray? What do you have for plan B? And that's where the experience of having multiple customers doing different kinds of projects enables us to kind of see, well, you know, this type A on job 1 is a lot like type B on job 2. And if they fall down on this first one, we can supplement with this other. So there's a lot of that we think brings value to the end user and helping them understand that they do have some options and how to solve their problems. And those are the things we want to help them with.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you're trying to understand the customer's needs, really it's just trying to assess trade-offs sometimes. You know, I think distribution, I think supply chain, we typically try to have an end-to-end, you know, kind of framework in mind at all times, you know. So if you go with, you know, choose your own adventure, door 1, you know, here are some trade-offs. You're going to have some higher costs on the, you know, extra long fixtures. You can get a 53-foot trailer, but you may, you know, it's a cheap cost to get a truck just to load it up and ship it out, but it's going to spend a lot of man hours unloading it if they don't have the right equipment at the destination. You know, the trade-off would be, you know, maybe you can go with a higher sense of transportation, maybe get a flatbed or a Conestoga, and maybe it'd be easier for them to offload, where they could have, you know, they don't need the same equipment to offload. And so it's more expensive on one end versus less expensive on the other. So it's really just trying to figure out what the trade-offs are in every transaction and presenting those options to the customer and see what they're comfortable with. There's very few times it's just a lose-lose situation. You know, there's always something that we could find a solution for at the end of the day.
Well, and I think you just kind of answered, or maybe you're starting to answer one of the questions that I have, and it's maybe a question a lot of customers have, and that is, what makes centralizing your parts and pieces cost effective, right? And what you just kind of described to me, and tell me if I'm right about this, is you're the expert. So you're going to leverage your knowledge and your skill and your relationships to understand this costs this much. This takes this much work on this end. This takes this much square footage to store. And then, you know, as a distributor like FSG, we're doing that in mass quantity for a bunch of people, right? So we can kind of distribute that cost across a bunch of customers. So I guess that's one of the really big questions I hear. Like, is it really cost effective to like store my stuff in one warehouse in Texas and send it across the country? Is that really cost effective?
Operationally, for us, it is. It's more cost effective to manage one warehouse versus 30. It's easier to pull from a larger pile of material that's there and fill more orders. And so the efficiencies are there from that standpoint. But to kind of, I guess, maybe speak to what's underneath one of your questions, and I think we talked about this earlier, is can you really send a 90-cent light bulb from California to Maine and do that profitably and effectively? The answer is no, you can't. And what I've learned is, you'll drive yourself nuts if you look at every single transaction that way, because there will be a large percentage of them, and this is true for many distributors, a large percentage of transactions isolated are not profitable. But when those transactions are part of a larger service offering to a client, they're necessary because the customer needs that light bulb in Maine that's only available in California at this time. So you have to weigh that in and really take a whole customer approach, I think, in terms of all of the services that you bring to them. And that's been one of the, I think, strengths inside of FSG is the ability to do more than just take that 90-cent light bulb or widget or whatever it is across the country. We can do other things for them, because if you're taking care of them on that little thing, they're more likely to entrust you with the big thing that's going to come up when they do a project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, we're not just selling a part, we're providing a service, and FSG's depth of service, it's really not, distribution it's a supporting actor, it's not the main character, and I think, distribution provides a valuable service, but when I look at my role or distribution as really just a part of just something bigger within FSG, and just providing that service, it goes a long way.
What are your guys' biggest obstacles, both from a client side, supply side, through the whole process? What are the biggest obstacles that you guys are finding yourself overcoming most often?
Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
I need to think about that one.
I had my mute on. I think probably the biggest is information on the front end. Information about the schedule, and what Andrew spoke to earlier is understanding those expectations, because people, when you really get to the place where you're trying to pin them down on expectations and define what those are, because we live in a world of defining that, right? They say, I need this material for my project on this date. And that's the extent of it. But that material that they need for that project is made up of a list of about 100 items, and it's going to require these kind of carriers to get there. And we have to define all of that. So I'd say that's probably the biggest part, is having the right information up front to be able to define the level of service you're going to provide when you actually execute on it.
Yeah, I echo that entirely. It's information, and I know sometimes people want to be guarded with, I don't want to tell too much, but I think being open-handed with it just provides a greater understanding of the need, and it helps set the expectation for the customer at the end of the day.
So from a facility standpoint, one of the takeaways is include your distribution and include these people like you, as early in the process as possible, so that you can create solutions around their schedule and around their challenges, rather than just trying to, deliver things without knowing what's going on. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Earlier the better.
Yeah, earlier the better. I think, salespeople, they're geared for, they ask their questions that I think reflect, what their problems, what their questions are. We may ask almost the same question, but maybe in a different way, just because we're trying to get to something different than like a salesperson. So when someone just tries to communicate, we're getting secondhand or thirdhand or fourthhand information from a sales rep to an inside salesperson or project manager, sometimes we have questions that it's like, well, that didn't really answer that. So involving an actual person that's in the operations realm can really help make the project just run smoothly every single time.
Sorry, I thought Steve was muted again. I couldn't see it.
No, I'm back. Sorry.
I want to know, the thing that as we think about what's kind of transpired over the last few weeks, we started a conversation talking about that, and then we kind of talked a little bit about the business offering, and let's kind of pivot back to that for just a second. And I'm curious, what do you guys see, just based on the few little things we've seen? What are some of the big picture things for facility operators that you're seeing might, I mean, I know it's speculation at this point, but might be changing down the road. We're seeing interest in lighting products that may have never seen interest before, or we haven't seen a lot of interest in before. We're seeing an interest in different products and pieces that people may not have even thought about before, like cash register shields and stuff like that. So, from your seat, and then the other thing is we're seeing a huge education, right, in the remote work world, like being remote and being apart or being separate. So from your seat, from product manage, or I'm sorry, from warehousing and distribution and logistics, what do you see as some of the things that maybe the facility and property management landscape are going to be looking at a few months down the road that might be a little bit different from January?
That's a hard one. In my crystal ball is foggy, but I think there's a couple of things that this has done to everybody, and this will filter into all businesses. It's caused an intense prioritization around what's essential. I mean, the term essential business has a whole new meaning today versus what it did 4 weeks ago. And I think everybody's going to be asking that question inside of their own businesses. What is essential? And so defining what's essential within your business, and then kind of simplifying around what's essential so that it, I think, one, is easy to maintain, and two, easy to keep going in a time of crisis. So, that's sort of where my head is prioritize around what's essential, and then how to simplify that piece that's essential so that it's sustainable in the event of disruption and things kind of coming apart.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, this work from home, this revolution or quarantine, the unfortunate aspect is you can't quarantine production. You can't quarantine distribution. An order's not going to pick itself. I mean, maybe if you're Amazon and have a robot do it for you, but FSG, in most distribution centers don't. You have to have that personnel there doing the work, and the men and women on the front lines. But I think the best part about what FSG has done with centralized distribution is we have economy of scale. We can service customers to all our markets. I think better than if it were, little divisions, everywhere else. If they were quarantined, unable to provide service for their location, we could fill that gap for sure.
You said something that I want you guys to kind of emphasize for me and answer this question. You said you still have to have those people, right? And it's not just the person pulling the order on the aisle and putting it on the truck, right? You have to have the people that take the order, that understand and can listen and answer the questions and then get it down the road. Talk to me about that just a little bit. I mean, what should a company expect from a distributor, supplier? What should they expect when it comes to the people that are helping them? What knowledge level should they expect? What professionalism? What has y'all's experience been, and what kind of teams have y'all built to help customers with their product management and distribution of their products, or the products they need to run their businesses?
Yeah, I think that's the critical element within distribution, and it falls under a lot of headings. Product knowledge is certainly one, but that's evolved into now it's customer knowledge, and you have to know about the customer, and you have to be honed in on his particular and specific needs. And as things become more complex, you have to become a student of those things that he's using, so that you can address and answer those questions for him. So that's a big part of, I think, just the knowledge base of it is understanding your client and his needs, and then your people have to be able to respond to that. The other thing that as our business has shifted from much more project heavy versus sort of the flow of parts and pieces going out to maintain facilities is you have to have people that specialize in that project management arena. And that's everything from the front end of the understanding the design, the specification, the procurement of the product, and getting it into the transportation network so it gets there to them on time.
At the warehouse, and where it's actually getting, what kind of teams have y'all built, Andrew? That, and what are they? Because I think that's one thing. It's not not a job to sneeze at. It's there's a lot of things to keep track of. There's a lot going on. What are the teams looking like out there? What are they doing? And what are some of the things that you've learned? Don't share anything proprietary you don't want to share, but what are some things you've learned that have made it better for you and your role?
Yeah, some of the teams, I mean, we've got some phenomenal people, and I think the teams, from operations, with admin, with receiving, we have an inventory team that really keeps track of all of our products, our shipping department. These are teams that have really, they specialize in a way that, I think before, if you were to just manage a project, and let's say you've got a national rollout of a bunch of stores and you're just drop shipping a bunch of material from vendors or manufacturers to the site, you expect that technician to do all that inventory management, to have that accuracy, to honestly spend the time that we would on that material out in the field, but they don't have the tools, but they don't have the resources, and that's not their job. Their job is to do installs. They don't want to sit back with a bunch of material counting things. They want to be out there in the field doing what they were trained to do. And I think when we approach like a national rollout, you're looking at, I think, a specialized group of operations professionals that can kit a shipment for a store. They can ship it to the tech. The tech can load, have no ambiguity or frustration over, what am I taking to the site today? I've got 10 sites. I've got a ton of material. I got to pick piece 1 from this skid, and I got to pick piece 2 from these other skids. They got to pick their own orders, and then at the end of the day, you got to wrap up the project. I mean, I feel sorry for the tech that has to do that. That's not what they're hired for, and plus, who wants to pay a tech to do all that? They're expensive. At the end of the day, I think of my customer, I'd rather have an hourly rate from a warehouse man that's doing the inventory job better than electrical technician that's not doing that job well at all, And so just thinking about just how that impacts the entire profitability of the job, those warehouse people, it's not a job to sneeze at. We keep, I think, profitability within the project and accuracy.
Well, speaking of jobs that are complex and that you don't want to have people doing that are kind of out of their price range, one of the questions that I've seen online just now is talking about managing warranties and managing service after the fact. So how does distribution and all of this mechanism apply to support and warranty work and guarantees and all of that after the project?
Yeah, warranty is boy, that is a word packed with dynamite in terms of what that means. And I can tell you our position on that is the manufacturers that build the products are the ones that establish the warranties. They establish the criteria of how long it's supposed to last, how you're supposed to operate it, and what happens if it doesn't meet those standards. Our role as a customer's partner in the supply chain is to make sure they get every bit of the warranty that's due them based on what the manufacturer committed to them for that product. So we help administer that for them. We can assist them in tracking it. What day did you install it? it failed within the warranty period. Here's how you remedy that. So those are the key components there. So that's the after the sale service. And then in this ever changing world of a lot of times, we've experienced instances where when LED first came to market, they were talking about 10 and 15 and 20-year warranties on products by all these manufacturers, several of whom fell out of the market very quickly after a few projects. And then users found themselves owning those products, the products failing, and then saying, what do I do now? And that's where we could also assist them by stepping in and saying, here's the solution today that you have for that, and here's the cost-effective way of remedying that. If the manufacturer's gone that was providing that warranty, then that's one of those buyer beware risks. So our role in that, again, is to help our customers get everything they're due based on what it was they bought at the time that they bought it.
Sorry, I was muted there. I'm gonna have to learn how to use my computer.
We're struggling with mute buttons today.
How do you ask that question though going into the project? I mean, one of the things Leon said a couple weeks ago is, how do you get a 10-year warranty from a customer who's been around for 3 years, or from a company? What kind of questions should you ask? How do you prepare yourself to mitigate that risk?
I think the best thing, this is where documentation is important. And this is where many manufacturers have done a great job of posting that on their websites, including it with their products. And the documentation really is the key. I remember working with a lady at GE that's what she had done for about 25 years was warranty. And she said, the thing I always tell everybody is, one, read the document, and two, read all of the print in the document. So what happens oftentimes is the word warranty gets thrown out there a little bit like Halloween candy, and everybody's grabbing it, and there's no real definition about what it means. So again, the documents are very important in defining that. And that's the part that, one, we want to provide that documentation to them. So we'll give them a warranty packet that says, here's your warranties when you finish a project of what you have on the products that you have. And here's what those operational characteristics and the criteria for what the expectation is for how that product should function for what period of time is all defined in here. If it misses that mark, then you have a warranty situation.
So how does this apply to MRO? So I know we throw that term MRO around a lot. Maybe explain exactly what that is, and explain how that's changing and how this distribution model fits into being able to fulfill those kinds of contracts.
Yeah, so if you're speaking about how it applies to MRO, this is one of the things that and you can go back to traditional light sources that were there for, a lot of years in the industry. The manufacturers didn't really publish warranties around traditional light sources. They gave something that is called rated life. And they said what rated life means is, if this product is designed to last 10,000 hours, you can expect about 50% of them to fail somewhere before that 10,000 hours. So it wasn't near the issue that it became when LED entered the market and everybody said, you got a 10-year warranty on this. It's going to last forever. You'll never need to change it, undefined. And now they've gotten much better at defining those things. So again, the way you manage through that is I love Andrew's earlier statement is understanding the expectations and managing towards those. So you just have to define it and manage towards those. And the industry is getting better at doing that. The way that they rate and the way that they're establishing new standards around products is helping define all of that. And so I think that's going to be another thing that just continually gets better as we move forward.
So you work with a lot of companies on MRO contracts. and have for a while, and some of the top companies in the United States. How are their expectations around that changing, and where do you think it's going in the future of those kinds of contracts and those kinds of relationships?
I think a couple of things is and this is the plus side of the companies that are deploying the new technology, call it solid state or LED, is the life ratings are much better and they last much longer. So used to be, we talked about group relamp approaches in fluorescent lighting systems. Well, what we're seeing and experiencing with some of the kind of, I would say, early adopters, leading edge companies that embraced LED early on, is they are in effect doing sort of group relamps of facilities by putting in the advancements in the technology. So maybe they did a project 3 years ago. We have clients that they did several thousand stores 3 years ago. They realized 3 years later there's better products today to put in those stores, so they take it from a group approach. So the emphasis on project activity has been strong, I would say, the last 5 years, and that's affected everything from how people manage their facilities that are in place now and the opportunities they look at to improve and upgrade those facilities.
And Steve, I think one of the things that is worth mentioning in this conversation is we talk about how kind of the transition from how, in the lighting business at least, kind of how product was managed and sent out and how it was sold, and solid state technology and all that good stuff. But the other thing that's changing a lot right now is actually how it's sold and how it's bought, right? We're going to a world where there's a ton of information out there. A lot of these customers can do their research long before we've even talked to somebody who can actually sell it to them, right? And so, with the online world and even our decision makers, kind of going to the internet to make the choices first and to get their information first. I think one of the things that maybe, I think almost all the big businesses know this, but I think maybe some may not or may not really understand that you can do this, is making it so that your individual locations can easily order the parts, easily find what they need. So you don't have to have a centralized buyer per se for your company. You can let your store level managers, you can let your division manager, regional managers make orders. And companies like FSG are going out and doing things that they're not necessarily earth shattering, but they're building custom catalogs, right? They're building online order guides. Talk to me a little bit about that. How does that help the business on your side, but how does that help the customer? And that's something they should expect, right? They should expect a business prepared to help them with their ordering and how they're actually going to get the things they need down the road.
Yeah, that's a big part. And I think that goes back to is knowing and understanding your customer, particularly if you have a customer that has, 1,000 disparate locations out there and they're using all kinds of things. The more you can know about what's in each one of those facilities, you can customize their, we call it portal or order guide on the web, so that when they log on, they're only looking at the things that they're likely to use inside of that facility. And then you leverage the kind of point and click technology. I need 6 of those and I need 7 of those that go over here in this part of my store. That's the piece that we think in a B2B approach is important for us to have. And so we do an awful lot of that kind of customization around our web ordering that we do with customers. And it has to, involve everything from those that want to be able to, they call it punch out from their accounting system right directly into your order portal so that they can bring it back in and populate their POs. Those are the kind of technology points that you have to make ordering easy. So instead of like looking at 100 things that I think I might need, I'm only looking at the 15 things that I use in my facility and which one is out. And we've also done some things too where we've married that up with, if they just have an image of the fixture that it's in their facility, they can just identify the fixture, click that, and it'll say, this is the product that goes inside there, and this is what you need. So that's a continual work in progress as facilities evolve and they change what they're putting in there. Sure. And we think that's the kind of the technology part that we have to do for them today.
Right. And, you know, and then it kicks it to Andrew, who makes sure that it gets on the truck, and we don't know how it happens, and it's all magic. And all of a sudden it's there. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know,
Yeah.
that's the part I just can't emphasize enough, is like, even if there is technology, regardless of the technology, there's people behind it. You know, there's people that, you know, understand it, and there's people interacting with it. You can even live chat, right? I've seen a lot of that, where they may look at something and they like, I have no clue, because I'm a manager at a little quick serve restaurant. I have absolutely no clue what this is. So it'll live chat and ask somebody, and then next thing I know, there's a truck out front with it a couple days later.
Yeah, and that is beautiful. That live chat is great, because it moves to, well, can you take a picture of it with your phone and send it to me? And then that helps. So again, it's just qualifying and identifying what that is. And then from there's a lot of people touch that does go on, because you can have automatic pickers and all of that other stuff. At the end of the day, somebody has to check it and make sure it's right, that it went into that box. And then Andrew's got to line up his carriers and drivers and logistic partners to make sure it gets there on time.
Well, I think that's a really important point that I don't want to get past either, and that is, this is a people relationship process. It can't just be an automated process, especially when we're talking about MRO, because you know, I've talked to friends that are managing stores or managing restaurants that are a part of an MRO project, and they've got lights out. You know, they're not experts on lights. They just want to get the replacement lights that they need. They don't need to, you know, get into a process of, you know, becoming an expert on the lights. They need to talk to somebody who can walk them through it, that understands their store, and that can get them what they need. And so a big part of getting what I need when I need it is talking to a person who understands what I need, because I think the hardest part is figuring out and knowing what you need, not necessarily making it available or even buying it, but just knowing what it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big part. And that again, that's the human touch part of it, is where you can talk to somebody that maybe has had experience with that same thing in the past, and they can help walk you through it.
So I want to know, Andrew, what is the craziest thing you have had to ship?
It's actually not with FSG. When I worked at Unilever, I was working for one of the hair care divisions, and shipping to Latin America, and I think it was Bolivia, and the address was next to the banana tree, and I was like, and the salesman was assuring me, they will know what you mean when it gets to port, it will get delivered. I'm like, if you say so, buddy. Like, we shipped a whole container of stuff. It arrived. But
hey, that's how my kids get around. I mean, I know it works, right?
Look for the banana tree.
Look for the banana tree.
Yeah, that doesn't fly in the United States, but yeah, apparently it works somewhere in Latin America. So
I don't know. There's some places in Texas that the cities don't even have street names, so they just give you directions. Literally, like, turn right at the red house.
Right. Yeah.
So
I have to admit, though, like, in FSG, though, like, one of the most difficult things to ship, you know, it's like engineers that make this stuff just don't think about how to ship it, you know. And so when they make things that are 12 feet long, I mean, it's a nightmare to ship. And so that's something we struggle with on a day-to-day basis.
It's really pretty, though, when it gets there, right?
Oh, it's super. It's nice. Yeah.
There is an art.
If it gets there in one piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this process, I'll kind of, in wrapping up here, I'll throw it to both Andrew and Steve. Two things. Kind of what has surprised you most about during this time, especially during this time? And what do you wish your customers knew before they pick up the phone and call you? What is the one thing you wish your customers knew ahead of time that it continually keeps coming up? Andrew, go first.
Yeah, I think one of the things is just maybe just assuring the customer, we are here, we are open, we are here to support your business. Really, I think that's the key thing I would want them to understand. We're deemed an essential business, and it's one thing, we're literally here to keep the lights on. So I think, that's one thing, that's one takeaway I would like the customer to have. And then lastly, I guess, thoughts through this whole thing, the thing I'm probably the most surprised is, despite people's distance with, virtual everything now, there seems to be a really strong emphasis on, people want to be a part, people want to talk, people are reaching out more. I definitely think there's more thoughtfulness. And I really like that. I think we took a lot of interaction for granted, and I don't know. I'm kind of it's kind of nice to see.
Steve?
Yeah, I would. I agree with Andrew. I'd say the first thing is what I want them to know when they call is we're going to help them. We're going to help them solve their problem. We're going to help them get through their issue. And that's really what we want to do first and foremost is we want to take care of whatever it is they've contacted us about and do it in a manner that they're happy with the result. And we're here to do that, and we're going to get through this together. And then I'd say that the thing that's probably been surprising is I'll call it the daily emotional roller coaster of the ups, the downs, we think this is happening and it's not, or we didn't see that coming and it is. So the ambiguity of it all has probably been the most surprising. But inside of that, I will agree with Andrew. I think people have become more thoughtful, more caring, and more connected through all of this. So we're going to come out better on the other end. We don't know how we're going to look, but I think it's going to bend towards goodness. So.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up right there. That was great. Next week, we are going to be talking about UV and germicidal light. Is it germicidal? That sounds very violent.
So scary. I know.
UV and lights that kill germs. I think that's
supposedly.
What we'll call them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very, 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 very hot topic right now. But we'll be talking with some experts on that again next week. Brandon, Steve, Andrew, thank you so much for your time, guys. Again, if you guys have any other questions, you can continue to reach out to us, and like, subscribe, and share, and you'll get notifications when these things go live. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.